There's a particular feeling that's hard to name. You leave a conversation, and something feels slightly off. You can't point to anything specific. Nothing dramatic happened. No one raised their voice. And yet you feel smaller than when you walked in. A little more uncertain. A little more like you owe something to someone, though you're not sure what or why. That feeling is worth paying attention to, because what often lives inside that feeling is the quiet aftermath of a boundary test, not a confrontation, not an obvious power move, just a small, careful probe, designed to find out exactly how much you'll allow, how quickly you'll apologize, and how far your edges can be moved before you even notice they've shifted. This is how manipulative people often operate, not with force, but with patience, not with cruelty, but with subtlety. And understanding that subtlety is one of the most important things you can do for your own psychological well-being. Let's talk about what's actually happening. Machiavelli, writing in a very different world, understood something timeless about human social dynamics. He observed that people who seek to gain influence over others rarely announce their intentions. They study, they watch, they test the terrain before they commit to a direction. What he described in the context of political power maps, perhaps uncomfortably, onto certain interpersonal dynamics we all encounter at some point in our lives. The boundary test is, at its core, an information-gathering exercise. A person who relies on manipulation to meet their needs, whether that need is control, validation, security, or something else entirely, needs to know what they're working with. They need to understand your tolerance for discomfort, your tendency to accommodate, relationship with guilt, and your willingness to prioritize harmony over honesty. And they find out by testing. The first and perhaps most common test is the small overstep. It might look like a joke at your expense. Something light enough that objecting to it feels oversensitive. If you laugh along or stay quiet, the message received is that this territory is available. The joke gets a little sharper next time. The comment a little more personal. Each small overstep is a data point. Each silence is interpreted as permission. Dale Carnegie spent much of his work exploring how deeply human beings are driven by the need to feel understood and valued. What he illuminated from a generous angle is also something that can be exploited from a less generous one. People who are skilled at social dynamics understand that most of us will go to considerable lengths to avoid conflict, to be liked, and to maintain the feeling that a relationship is warm and intact. A boundary tester often relies on exactly this. They count on your desire to keep the peace being stronger than your discomfort with what just happened. The second test is the favor with invisible weight. Someone does something kind for you, genuinely kind perhaps, but there is a quality to it that feels slightly off. It arrives at a particular moment. It's mentioned again later. It becomes subtly a reference point. You begin to feel that you owe something, that your autonomy in a certain situation is slightly compromised because of what was done for you. This is sometimes called the reciprocity trap in social psychology. It takes one of our most pro-social instincts, gratitude, the desire to give back, and bends it into a leash. The third test is the emotional reaction probe. Understand. A person may say or do something that is mildly provocative. Then watch your response very carefully. Not to understand you, to calibrate you. If you express hurt, do you then immediately soften it with reassurance? If you express frustration, do you quickly apologize for having it? If you set a limit, do you then spend the next hour explaining and justifying it until it dissolves? These responses tell a skilled manipulator a great deal. They reveal whether your emotions are a source of power for you or a vulnerability that can be leveraged. Carl Jung wrote about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we haven't fully integrated, the wounds we haven't fully examined. One of the most common shadows in people who find themselves repeatedly in manipulative dynamics is an old, deep belief that their needs are too much, that asking for space or honesty or respect will cost them love, that the safest way to be loved is to be endlessly accommodating. This belief, often formed long before adulthood, can make a person extraordinarily readable to someone who knows how to look. This is not a criticism. It is an invitation to awareness. Because here's what changes everything. When you understand the pattern, You stop being a passive participant in it. You begin to notice the small overstep in real time rather than 3 days later. You feel the weight of the favor before you've accepted it. You catch yourself over-explaining a boundary and you stop. Not with aggression, not with a speech, just with a quiet, grounded stillness that communicates something very clearly. I see what's happening here, and I'm not available for it. Psychological protection is rarely dramatic. It doesn't usually look like a confrontation. It looks like a pause, joke that wasn't really a joke. It looks like saying simply and without apology, "That doesn't work for me." It looks like letting someone be disappointed without rushing to fix their disappointment. It looks like trusting your own perception of a situation, even when someone is working hard to make you doubt it. That last point deserves its own moment. One of the most disorienting aspects of sustained emotional manipulation is what psychologists sometimes call reality distortion, the gradual erosion of your confidence in your own experience. You begin to wonder if you're too sensitive, too suspicious, too demanding. You replay conversations, looking for evidence that you were the problem. This is not a coincidence. Confusion is often a feature, not a side effect. A person who can make you doubt your own perception has, in a very real sense, taken the keys to your inner world. Reclaiming those keys begins with something simple: trusting the feeling you had when you walked out of the room, not obsessing over it, not building a case, just acknowledging it. Something felt off. That matters. You don't need to diagnose anyone or declare anyone a villain. You simply need to take your own experience seriously enough to let it inform how you move forward. The Stoics understood that we cannot always control what others do. We cannot always see manipulation coming before it arrives, but we can cultivate what they called the inner citadel, a stable, grounded center that doesn't collapse under social pressure, guilt, or the fear of disapproval. This is not coldness. It is not cynicism. It is the quiet confidence of someone who knows their own values well enough that no one can easily talk them out of those values. Boundaries in this light are not walls. They are simply the honest expression of who you are and what you need to remain whole. When someone tests your boundaries, they are, in a sense, asking a question. The most powerful thing you can do is answer it clearly, not with anger, but with clarity, not with a lecture, but with consistency. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to have needs. You are allowed to notice when something doesn't feel right and to trust that noticing. The people in your life who genuinely care for you will not require you to shrink in order to keep the peace. They will not make you feel guilty for having a self. And if someone consistently does, if the small oversteps keep coming, if the invisible debts keep accumulating, if your reality keeps being questioned, that pattern is telling you something important. Not about your worth, about the dynamic. And you are allowed to respond to that information. Understanding yourself more deeply and reading the people around you more clearly, that is not paranoia, that is wisdom, and it is one of the most protective things you can cultivate. If this video gave you something useful, consider sharing it with someone who might need it. And if you want to keep exploring the deeper layers of human psychology and behavior, Inside the Labyrinth is here for exactly that. And if this spoke to a part of you that rarely gets heard, stay with that feeling for a moment. You are not broken because you feel deeply. You are only beginning to understand yourself. Subscribe to Inside the Labyrinth for more reflections on the hidden patterns of the human mind.